on this Shabbat or whatever day you are watching this message. We are in a series called The Scroll of Genesis, and we're spending a year going through the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, following the cycle of Torah readings in the traditional readings for Judaism. So the Torah begins with creation of the world and the disobedience of humanity, which leads to the story of a family, ancient Israel. And through that family, God restores his creation to right relationship with him through a member of that family, Yeshua, our Messiah. So last week we talked about creation, the creation of man and woman in the image of God, and with the breath of God, and how Adam is formed from Adamah, man from dust, from the ground, and the breath of God is breathed into him. And then God splits Adam in half to take woman from man. The one becomes two, and in sex, the two become one again to make more images of God. If you missed that message, you should go back and watch it before you watch this one. We also said last week, quoted Nahum Sarna, who said Genesis is but a prologue of the historical drama that unfolds itself in the ensuing pages of the Bible. And if Genesis is a prologue to the whole Bible, then Genesis 1 through 11 is a prologue to the story of Abraham. And Genesis 11 shows this genealogy. It ends with a genealogy from Noah after the flood and his son Shem to a man named Terach and his 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So it says in Genesis 11 and verse 27, these are Terah's genealogies. Terah fathered Abraham, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. And Haran died before Terah, his father, in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abraham and Nahor took wives for themselves, and the name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, father of Milcah and Iscar. Sarah was barren. She did not have a child. Well, that kind of ruins the genealogy. Sarah is barren. So we're going through a genealogy and then all of a sudden it stops. And the question with barrenness is, how can God bring life in the midst of death? Well, we know he's done it before in creation. He's also done it several times since in Genesis 1 through 11. Now it comes to the building of the family, but that family can't even start because the mother of the family is barren. So it continues in chapter 11, verse 31. Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, Haran's son, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and he took them out of Ur of the Chaldees to go to the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah's days were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Last week, I showed you what's called the ancient Near East. And it's this area that forms what is known as the biblical world in Genesis. And it's within this area that Abraham's family comes from Mesopotamia, from Babylon. They leave Babylon, where Genesis 11 tells us that they were building a tower to reach God, the Tower of Babylon. And humanity builds this tower, it says, in Genesis 11, to reach from the earth to the sky. It's a man-made place where heaven and earth can meet. And so God confuses the language and scatters the people all over this world. And there's this sort of tragedy as humanity is constantly looking to make itself God in the place of God. And we talked about last week that God made humanity. He takes one creation that he forms from the dust. He splits the two, man and woman, into his image, creates them in his image and splits them. And so the two become one and create more images of God. He told them, commanded them to be fruitful and multiply. And they did. And some things go well and some things don't. Well, there's a flood that destroys the whole world in Genesis 6. So God calls one man out from his own people in order to create a new people. It's the same idea where one becomes two and the two become one again in mutual blessing. So what can bring new creation out of the tragedy of Babylon? Well, God speaks. Just like he did when he created in Genesis 1 and 2, now he speaks to a man, Abram. Genesis 12 starts at this Torah portion, Lech Lecha. It says, then Adonai said to Abram, get out, get going from your land and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. My heart's desire is to make you into a great nation, to bless you, and to make your name great so that you may be a blessing. My desire is to bless those who bless you, but whoever curses you, I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. So one commentator, Tremper Longman III, that's a awesome name. He says, this is like a second creation account. In Genesis 1, he called the cosmos and also humanity into existence by the power of his command. Now the divine-human relationship has been broken, and he speaks again to Abraham in order to create a new people on whom he will place his blessing. That's why today's message is called the family of God. God's speech to Avram has three parts. He says, first, leave your family to bring a new family into existence. 2, he says, you will be a great nation, and I will give you a great name. And 3, God bestows the responsibility to Abraham and his descendants to represent his blessing to others. And the Torah portion starts in Genesis 12 and verse 1, as the name of the Torah portion is Lech Lecha, which the first word that God says to Avram is, get out. It's Exodus language, far before Exodus even happens from Egypt, to get out of the land you are in and go to a better land that I have promised you. Abraham is the first father of the promises of our fathers, and it's a promise that sets up all the promises that will follow through the rest of the Torah, even through the prophets and the writings, and straight to the Jewish people in the first century under Roman oppression, to Yeshua our Messiah. It sets the tone for everything that is going to happen. But of course, Sarah is barren, and Abraham and Sarah are both old, and they have no children. And Avram means exalted father, and Sarah means queen. So the way it's playing out is a king and a queen who have no children are promised a land, a nation, and a family through whom all the nations of the earth will be blessed. But they can't because they're barren. So what can bring new creation out of this tragedy? Who can bring life where there is only death? So God speaks, because God is the only one who can speak things into being. It is life from non-life. He has already done it many times, from creation to the flood to the Tower of Babylon through Genesis 1 through 11. And it's similar to the other stories of the ancient Near East, but the gods can't control all of these things that the God of Israel can control. So how will he speak life into being? Well, it's with a word and a blessing. Again, verse 1 says, of chapter 12 says, then Adonai said to Avram, get going out of your land and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. So there's three parts to the speech. The first part of God's speech to Avram is you're going to leave your family to bring a new family into existence. But when does God say that to Avram? And it seems in the next verse, in chapter 12 and verse 4, it says, so Abram went just as the Lord had spoken to him, and also Lot went with him. And now Abram was 75 years old when he departed for Haran. And Abram took Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his nephew, and all their possessions that they acquired, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they left to go to the land of Canaan, and they entered the land of Canaan. So Avram left Haran, but it seems when his family was still there and alive, that some had stayed behind and some moved forward, which, by the way, is a theme all the way through the Bible. Some people stay, some people go. He leaves Haran while his father is still alive. And we know that Terah was a worshiper of other gods in Babylon. The whole family's from Mesopotamia. And Terah was from a place that worshipped other gods. And so he did as well. Later on in the book of Joshua, after slavery and after the exodus from Egypt and after the giving of the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai and after we wander in the wilderness for 40 years, they finally entered the promised land, the land that God promises to Abraham. And the land is divided by Joshua to each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And Joshua is reminding the people of all of the history and the story in this last speech before Joshua dies. And Joshua says in Joshua 24 and verse 2, it says, "Then Joshua said to the people, 'Thus says the Lord God of Israel, from ancient times your fathers,'" Terah, the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, "lived beyond the river and worshipped other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through the entire land of Canaan and multiplied his offspring." So Joshua is reminding the people as he's about to die that from ancient times your fathers lived beyond the river in the ancient Near East in Mesopotamia, but I took Abraham from beyond the river and led him to Canaan. I took Avram out. It's Exodus language before the Exodus, out of slavery. But he took Avram out from slavery to the gods and in service to the one God, but it's the same language that Genesis uses. In fact, back to Genesis 12 and verse 6, when God gives Abraham this promise, he then walks through the future promised land. It says, Avram passed through the land as far as the place of Shechem and as far as Moreh's big tree. The Canaanites were in the land there. Then Adonai appeared to Avram and said, "I will give this land to your seed," so that he built an altar to Adonai who had appeared to him. From there, he moved to the mountain to the east of Bethel and erected his tent with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of Adonai. So Avram kept journeying southward. So Abraham, when he receives his promise for the land, travels actually through all of the future land, stopping at all these sacred places that are not sacred places for the children of Israel yet, but will become sacred places throughout the story of the rest of the Torah. He goes through the hilltops and sacred trees where he sees God, and he finds places to build tents and to build altars next to the tent, in the tent, and call on God to meet him in worship. These are all the same elements of the Exodus and the wilderness and everything in the Torah before any of these things happen. This promised land is a new Eden. It's a place where heaven meets earth on a hill, which we eventually build the temple on. And the exalted father, Avram, and his wife, Queen, take their place as a new Adam and Eve who are marking out a new Eden to meet with God in order to bless all of humanity. God is creating a new family, the family of God. And it's not too long before things go terribly. And at the same time, the promise is a new Eden for all of humanity and a future land of blessing for their physical descendants. So the promise is to bring new life. God brings about, he creates something where there is nothing. And of course, Sarah's barren. She can't have children, but God promises, "I will make you a nation and I will give you a Gibor name, a great name." You know, throughout the first part of Genesis, chapters 3 to 11, there are many uses of the word Gibor, which means great or mighty. There are these Gibor, mighty men called the Nephilim. Then, right before the flood. Then in Genesis 10, Nimrod is one who's named as being Gibor. He has a Gibor name. He's a Gibor hunter. He's founded cities. And this great man, this great name, this great hunter is the one who creates the world's first cities, which include Babylon. And a great leader, the way it's have been understood in history and in the world and even in the scriptures, is a Gibor leader makes a Gibor name for himself in battle and conquest. History is about violence and conquering. You think about people who come later like Alexander Gibor. That's funny. Alexander the Great. Remember God's speech to Avram has three parts. leave your family to bring you into a new family into existence. And the second promise in God's speech to Avram is you will be a Gibor nation, and God will give you a Gibor name. So right before Abraham, in the narrative of Genesis, the people of Babylon, which is where Abraham's family came from, they try to create this tower, the Tower of Babel's, the Tower of Babylon. And it's a tower that reaches to the sky. It's a man-made place where heaven meets earth, instead of a mountain, which is in Hebrew poetry is where heaven meets earth. And it's called the Tower of Babylon. It says in Genesis 11, verse 4, so the men said to themselves, come, let's build ourselves a city with a tower whose top reaches into heaven. So let's make a name for ourselves, or else we'll be scattered all over the face of the whole land. They built the Tower of Babylon to make a Gibor name for themselves. Now, Avraham, who has been called out of Babylon, does not make a great name for himself. God promises that he will make Abraham's name Gibor. And for what purpose? It's not to rule, it's not to reign in violence, but it's to be a blessing. Genesis 12, verse 2. My heart's desire is to make you into a great nation, to bless you, to make your name Gibor, so that you may be a blessing. It's what happens when people try to make names for ourselves. It typically happens through manipulation and violence. When we try to make our own name great, we are only caring about ourselves. But when God makes a name great, he raises a person up that is not great by themselves so that they can be a blessing to others. The people of Babylon did not want to be scattered. So they made a great name for themselves, and God scattered them to the whole ancient Near East. But with Abraham, God names a lowly migrant herdsman Gibor, so that he can be a blessing for the rest of the nations. So God's speech to Avram has three parts, right? Leave your family and bring a new family into existence. Second, you will be a great nation, and I will make your name great. And third, God bestows the responsibility to Abraham and his descendants to represent God's blessing to others. It's in chapter 12 and verse 3. My desire is to bless those who bless you, but whoever curses you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So, I ask this. Why are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob known as the chosen people? Everyone knows the Jewish people are chosen. And most people, including most Jewish people, have no idea what we are chosen for. We are chosen as the descendants of Abraham for the responsibility to represent God's blessing to the Gentiles, to all the nations of the earth. And part of the question is, how can a people that have never been counted more than 15.7 million people in 1939 in a world of billions have such a positive effect on the world? It's blessing from God. Was the blessing for ourselves? Of course not. It was for the world and to lead the world to God. This is the weirdness, the two-sided concept of blessing and curse of the Jewish people to the world. We are a blessing whether we serve God or believe in God or not, the Jewish people. I mean, all you have to do is just take a sample of the Jewish contributions to science and arts and culture and literature, just about anything you can think of, and you see this overwhelming imbalance of blessing that comes from the Jewish people. A curse is death and isolation and exile. And at the same time, we are considered a curse by those who hate us. Why? Because the positive impact on the world makes no sense if you don't believe in God. It has to be a conspiracy to control the world by Jewish people. How else could they have all the money, people say? How else could Jews control Hollywood? They must have secret councils, and they must have a secret space laser that controls the world. No, The blessing is God will protect Abraham's children so that we can bless everyone who has been scattered into exile from the Tower of Babylon. Then as the Jewish people, as we follow God and do teshuvah, returning to God from exile ourselves, then we lead the Gentiles back to God. It's the whole biblical narrative that starts in Genesis and carries through the prophets and the writings and straight into the New Testament. Look, we often say at Restoration that we have this deep belief that everyone belongs in the family of God. And God is the only one who can speak things into being, just like he did in creation in Genesis 1. And with Abraham and Sarah, God installs this like a new king and a queen of a new Eden, this family of God, so that they can represent God's purpose to the nations in blessing. God created human beings. He created Adam, humanity, and he created the nations, which is just, Gentile just means nations, goyim in Hebrew. He calls Abram out from the goyim to be separate so that his descendants can bring everyone together in God. This is why there are Jews and Gentiles. This is why there are two groups. They come from one, Goyim, the Gentiles. And just like male and female, they're separated into two. Then they're brought back together as one with the express purpose of blessing every nation and the people of every nation on earth. At Restoration, our goal is not to have a synagogue full of Jewish people. Our goal is diversity, to see people from every nation, every tribe, and every language know Yeshua. We want to preach to anyone and everyone that would hear of the great things that God has done through his son, Yeshua our Messiah, and to invite them to join the family. There's diversity in our God-given identities as Jews and Gentiles. One people separated into two, then brought together as one, not the same, but different. There's different colors, different perspectives, different backgrounds, different food. So why is, if it's a part of the blessing of God on Abraham, that in you, the Jewish people, all the families of the earth will be blessed? Paul picks up on this in the New Testament in the letter of Ephesians, and he speaks about the unity of Jews and Gentiles who follow Yeshua in the city of Ephesus in the first century. And both groups, Jew and Gentile, need to understand who they are in God and how to worship God together as Jews and Gentiles. Speaking to Gentiles, Paul says this in Ephesians 2, verse 11. He says, "Therefore, keep in mind that once you, Gentiles in the flesh, who were called uncircumcision by those called the circumcision, which is performed in the flesh by hand, at that time you were separate from Messiah. You were excluded from the commonwealth of Israel. You were strangers to the covenants of promise and had no hope and were without God in the world. But now, in Messiah Yeshua, you who were once far have been brought near by the blood of Messiah." You who were once far off, Gentiles, have been brought near, which is where the Jewish people are, by the blood of Messiah. Near and far. Near and far. I don't know about you, but I learned about near and far on Sesame Street from Grover. And maybe you remember near, far. And this is how it works theologically. Jewish people are near because of a relationship to Abraham. Gentiles are far because they have no relationship to God through Abraham. But through the blood of Yeshua, Paul is saying, Gentiles who were far have been brought near because of Abraham and his descendants were already near. And our job as a people is to bring, the Jewish people, is to bring Gentiles who are far near through the blood of Yeshua. And this may be one of my favorite theological concepts. It comes from David Stern's book, Messianic Judaism, and I'm indebted to David for this content. It's like my favorite thing. And may David's memory be a blessing. It is to me every day. Here in these verses that we just read, in Ephesians 2:11 through 13, Paul mentions 5 things. There are 5 ways that Gentiles were far, and now they've been brought near through the blood of Yeshua. So Gentiles, Paul is saying, through the blood of Yeshua, are now connected to Messiah, members of God's people, included in the covenants. They now have hope, and they are now with God because they were not God. So through the blood of through the blood of Yeshua, Gentiles gain these 5 things. But by nature, Jewish people, because of our relationship to Abraham, already have the 5 things. Through Abraham, we are connected to Messiah, members of God's people, included in the covenants. We have hope, and we are with God. But Jewish people need the blood of Yeshua as much as Gentiles need it. The sequencing is just different. So Jewish people get the blood of Yeshua last. We have these 5 through our relationship with Abraham and the covenants that God made to our fathers. And then Gentiles start with the blood of Yeshua and then receive these other 5 things. Gentiles start with the blood of Yeshua and are grafted into the promises that God made to the Jewish people through Abraham. Jewish people have the covenants that God made with Abraham. We need the blood of Yeshua last for salvation. It's the same 5 things. The order is different. It's the same 5 things, but the sequencing is different. One starts with blood. The other ends with blood. You still need the blood of Yeshua. And this was God's design all the way back to the beginning. That there are these 2 groups that come from one, just like male and female. One that is separated into 2 that are then brought together as one with the express purpose of blessing every nation and people on earth. It's why our goal is diversity, because everyone belongs in the family of God. To you who are Gentiles, to you who were far, you have now been brought near. To those who were near, the Jewish people, you have been, but you don't have to be far because you are near. And we want to build a community, and have been building a community in Seattle that is full of people from every nation in a city very far on the other side of the world from Israel, from where these covenants were made. Jew and Gentile, male and female, rich and poor, every color, every ethnicity. We are a family, and we believe that everyone belongs in the family of God in the name of Yeshua and through the blood of Yeshua. And of course, that family is so much larger than our little congregation in Seattle. We're just a small part of a bigger family that goes all the way back to Abraham and includes people from all over the world and all over time that believe in Yeshua. Some were far, some were near, and now we've all been brought back together. So Paul continues in Ephesians 2, verse 17. And he came, Yeshua, and he proclaimed shalom, peace, to you who were far away and to those who were near. Yeshua proclaims peace to Gentiles who are far away. And Yeshua says peace to Jewish people who are near. Because, Paul continues in verse 18, that for through him we both have access to the Father by the same Spirit. So then, you are no longer, to Gentiles, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but you are fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's household. And this is why at Restoration, Jews remain Jews and Gentiles remain Gentiles. And we all belong to the same family because there's room for everyone, just as you are. And we all should be grateful for who God created us to be. Some of us are physical descendants of Abraham, the Jewish people, and some of us are spiritual descendants of Abraham from the nations. But we are all part of the same family, and we both have access to the same God the Father by the same Holy Spirit. And none of us we are no longer strangers, and we don't have to be foreigners, but we are fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's household. We are the family of God together. God's speech to Avram has 3 parts. Leave your family to bring a new family into existence. 2, that God will make a great nation and that he will make Abraham's name great. 3, that God bestows a responsibility to Abraham and to his descendants to represent his blessing to others. And those 3 parts still apply to us today. First, you are invited into Abraham's family no matter where you come from, Jew or Gentile. 2, when you accept Yeshua as the Messiah, you are now part of the body. of Messiah. 3, we, Jew and Gentile together, have the responsibility to represent God's blessing to the whole world. In Yeshua, we form the body of Messiah together. Not just restoration, but so many people and congregations and communities that come together to make this amazing, multi-ethnic, multi-generational family of God. We are the body together, and Yeshua is the head of the body. And the Spirit of God dwells in us so that we can bring more people into God's family. All people, Jew and Gentile, male and female, slave and free, all people, because of the grace and mercy of God from the beginning. Jew and Gentile can build communities that are places where people are no longer foreigners or strangers, but brothers and sisters in the same family. 2 parts, male, man and woman, Jew and Gentile, that bless Jewish people and people from the nations right here in Seattle and beyond, wherever you are watching from. God is the only one who can speak things into being. God is the only one who can bring life from non-life. And he's done it so many times, from creation to the flood, to the Tower of Babylon, to the family of Abraham. And he wants to speak life into you. He sent his son Yeshua to die and rise from the dead so that in him you can overcome your sin and the curse of sin and be a blessing wherever you are. So get out! That's the name of the Torah portion this week. Get up, get going, move to where God wants you to be. He designed you for right relationship with him, and he designed you to be a member of his family. So let's find ways to spread the blessing around to more people right where we are. I love you guys so much, and I hope you continue to hang with us as we walk through the scroll of Genesis together.